I would like to just go straight into the next session. We have had a view on tech and pharma, the big players. Now we're going into the startup scene with 3 really innovative companies coming up of Medicon Valley. And to start us off, it's my pleasure to invite Thomas Lethenborg, CEO of Monsenso, to share about his company and their journey to establishing themselves in the Danish market. So Thomas, welcome and take it away.
Thank you. And also thanks from my side to both Wilhelm and Heidi for a good start. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a regular Dane. Jag pratar lite svenska också, but I'll do this in English. When I say regular Dane, I have 2 parents. One who was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 37, was not treated for the mental effects of it. Died at the age of 53 from alcohol abuse. Another parent who had the first stroke at 57 with the ongoing mental effects of that, died at 73. I have 4 kids, one of which has been in psychological treatment. What I'm basically saying with this is that I'm just a regular Dane. Mental health, neurological disorders affect us all. And it is a leading burden of disease. It is a cause of early death. People with mental diseases typically die 10 to 20 years, severe mental diseases, 10 to 20 years earlier than the regular population. And that's the reason why, that's the reason why Monsenso is here, is to help provide better mental health to more people at lower costs. And try to avoid that burden of disease that it is. I'll talk shortly about Monsenso, about our solution, some of the things that we've done in the past and where we're heading, and share some of the experiences from the Danish market as well. We're a digital health company focusing on mental health and neurological disorders. We've basically created a solution that enables patient-centric care and also research the digital biomarkers that Wilhelm was talking about earlier. We have a validated platform that both supports real-world data collection from patients, from citizens, as well as personalizing the care. We've done 8 years of research and development with leading researchers both in the technological field as well as in the mental health field. Everything we've done was developed with patients, carers, clinicians, researchers, just like Heidi showed from the pictures of the user-centric development sessions. We are Class 1 CE medical device at this point in time. We will go through MDR classification during the coming year. We are ISO 13485 quality management certified, 27001 information security certified, and we live up to the country-specific requirements in the countries where we're active as well. So that was a short introduction. The solution basically connects patients in the middle, centric, with their care provider, their healthcare professional, psychologist, psychiatrist on the right, as well as potentially their relatives or the social worker in a municipality setting on the left. So it's aimed at both collecting data from the patient to inform themselves and the healthcare professional about the progression of their disease and their well-being. And it's also meant to give patients help between sessions. It's about the dots that Wilhelm had on his chart between the consultations. We collect a lot of rich data. We both collect the self-reported data, the diary data that we widely use in psychiatric services today, where people are asked to fill in questionnaires on a daily basis. We also have the clinical questionnaires, sensor data from phones, from wearables, voice pattern data in research projects to see how much we can say about people's depression level just by listening to the voice. We can embed treatment information, treatment exercises as well, so that people get the right treatment at the right time, at the right place. I think you mentioned that as well in your speech, Willem. So the value that we give to patients is the ability to get the most out of their treatment, basically, to clinicians to personalize the treatment and also be there between consultations for patients, right? And to prioritize the right patients at the right time. For clinics and hospitals, to make more with the same resources. And for partners, and partners here is both pharmaceuticals as well as private providers. It's about enabling real-world data collection and also, at the same time, digitizing the offering, the beyond the pill or above. You didn't say beyond the pill, you said something else. Around the pill approach that you were talking about, right? The case studies that we have, that I've brought with me here, consist of numerous different things. I'm here to talk about gaining customers in Denmark, but briefly, we work with pharmaceuticals, we work with private providers, we work in research settings across Europe as well. So we collaborate with more than 40 European universities in the research projects that we're engaged in. But when it comes to sharing the experiences from Denmark, I want to highlight one case, Region H, psychiatry, on the other side of the belt here, on Øresund. We are implementing the solution for all bipolar patients across the 5 psychiatric centers, as an example to both streamline and align the services. If that's the way it is, even in one individual healthcare region, the services are not the same in each of the centers. It very much depends on the center you go into, the person you're being treated with, and digitization helps align that. It helps gather this rich data that can be used as biomarkers, that can be used for quality measurement as well, and for further research. So all of the bipolar patients are basically also offered to be part of a new research project, Smart Bipolar, to really understand what works well for whom and at which point in time. So that's one case that I would want to highlight as an experience. We also work with municipalities in different constellations. We work with municipalities in addiction treatment. Ikast-Brande Kommune, Glostrup Kommune, who has bought our solution to support the treatment of addiction, both alcohol as well as opioid or related addictions. That's outpatient monitoring and patient support, both when they're in treatment, but also after treatment or post-treatment follow-up, to avoid or help avoid relapse. We are also working in the municipality sector with housing, what do you call it? Protected housing, bosteder in Danish, to help support the individuals there. Sometimes it's easier, it's less stigmatizing to actually answer how you're doing on a mobile phone than it is face-to-face. You're exploiting the consultation in a better way if you already have a mental x-ray before you have a consultation. So that's what we're doing there. We're also working with the job market, or the beskæftigelsesenheden in municipalities, in helping bringing people back to work. So people with mental disorders are often also out of job or have difficulties getting back into the job market. That's the reason why it is the leading burden of disease that costs more than 4% of GDP every year. And we work with, for instance, with Impano, a private provider, to deliver a full package of empowerment and motivation courses that are digitally supported to municipalities in Denmark. So these are some of the experiences that I wanted to share here that are related to what we've done in Denmark. We do have wider experience, as you can see, very much Europe focused, but we also have some experiences in US, in Middle East, as well as in Australia. So to wrap up and also comment on the conclusions here, it is possible, not easy, to make business in Denmark. it is of course based on public procurement. You know, you need to get on the ski-avtale, I think you call it statsavtal in Sweden, the public framework agreements. We need to do that in UK as well. We have a primary focus on UK and Denmark when it comes to direct business. So that's obviously something you need. Validation and research projects helps a lot. We've published more than 70 research articles with research partners around the technology. It does give credibility. We've been involved in 20 different research projects. But it's in order to get it out there in clinical practice or into everyday operations, regardless of whether it's in a health region, a municipality, or even with a pharmaceutical, you need to identify the initial supporters and promoters and stay with them. We've seen a lot of great pilots not becoming successful implementations because key stakeholders have changed jobs. And then there's not a key stakeholder to drive it forward. So that's really important, both for the acquirer or the purchaser, as well as for the vendor, to make sure that there is somebody who is really driving the innovation. The other thing is the clinician or the healthcare professional onboarding. Patients are not a problem. Patients want to use technological innovations as part of their treatment. Even the most severe schizophrenia patients or bipolar patients, they do want, or major depressive patients, they do want to use the technology. But if we don't have the clinicians with us, then it's not going to be a success. The third thing is we do have a lot of innovation money. We have in Sweden as well, pots of innovation money that we can tap into. But the transition from innovation to actually implementing it in practice, we need to be very sharp on defining the KPIs to actually take it to the next level, ensure that the budget holders of the next level are in a steering committee to be able to say, yes, if it meets the KPIs, then we will do the next thing, because otherwise we end up in this spiral of death by pilot that a lot of people have talked about in health tech, right? And we could have been better in the beginning of our lives. We've had churn that was related to underestimating the importance of the last point. So I think that's very important to stress, both for the purchasing parts as well as for the vendors in it. We all need to make sure that we don't innovate for the sake of innovation, but innovate to actually get it out there in real life. That was it from my side.
Thank you so much, Thomas. We will hear back later from you
Thank
as
you.
well. And I don't know about you, but I was nodding a lot, especially in the last slide, and I think some of us relate to that. And now we're going to hear from Sweden, and maybe Sweden is different. I don't know, but we'll see. And Patrick Börjesson, CEO of Medilevel, will tell us more. So, Patrick,
thank you very much. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming here today. My name is Patrick Börjesson, and I'm the CEO of Medilevel. And today I'm going to talk to you about what we have done as a company to succeed when it comes to making deals with the Swedish public sector. I hope you will find it interesting, and maybe you will learn something new also. But first, a little bit about Medilevel and what we do. We developed software to support the medicine titration. Today we have solutions to support ADHD treatment and also depression treatment. Our system is used both by the caregivers and the patients, and it will speed up the titration process so the caregivers can treat more patients with increased quality of care at a lower costs. It consists of two parts. One is a mobile app, which the patients use to report health data on a daily basis. And then there is a web, which the caregivers use to analyze the data sent in by the patient, and from there they can change the dose of the medicine. But I was not here to talk about our system. I was actually here to talk about the strategy we have to succeed in making business. So far, we have managed to make a deal with 5 different regions in Sweden. It's all done through direct procurement, and the reason for that is that Systems like ours and systems like Monsenso is doing, it's new. The caregivers, they don't know that our systems exist. They don't know that they actually need them. So there are no public tenders. And so to get around that, we have to be out there doing the proper selling job and telling them that they need our system. And then direct procurement is a very good way to start. So we have built a conscious strategy, how we work with it. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I call it our 3 A's. It's awareness, ambassadors, and that we need to accept that this takes a long time to close these deals. If we start with awareness, as I said before, very often they don't know that our system exists. So we work a lot with interest groups. It's both within patient organizations, like Attention for ADHD, but also for the caregivers, like the Nurses Union in Sweden, Vårdförbundet. We have close contact with them also. We visit a lot of trade fairs and conferences, and that's a really good place to meet people. One conference is for the psychiatry. We put up a booth where we handed out those travel mugs for coffee. But to get one, you had to give them, they had to give us their email and contact address. And that list we got, I'm still using it. This is 3 years ago, and it's so much value in that list to us. So be out there, meet them. Our decision makers, like the operational managers and unit managers, they are not very active on social media. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, for us, it has not worked at all. If they are there, they have some sort of default profile, and it's really, really hard to get in contact with them in that way. So, but normal media, like newspapers, magazines, radio, TV, those things really, really work. So, for example, the Nurses Union, Vårdförbundet, they have a printed magazine that they send out to all nurses a couple of times every year. It's called Vårdfokus. We have had a few articles in there, which means that our message goes out to all the nurses. And most of the time, it's the nurses using our system. So that's one way to do it. And a good way to get in those kind of publication is the last point, awards. We have participated in 3 award competitions. We won all 3 of them. And the press and the marketing we get from that, I mean, I would say it's worth millions of Swedish crowns. It would not have been possible with our own money as a startup to reach out to so many people. And also the jurors in those awards, they work as an expert and external quality stamp for us. So it's not just me saying that our product is great. It's somebody else who is working in the field saying this is really, really good. So for those of you out there trying to get through awards, spend a couple of hours, apply for them. It's worth it. And as I said, you get free press, but you also get money if you win. So it's really, really good. The next one, ambassadors. And we as a software company, our credibility when it comes to knowledge about how to treat patients and about drugs, it's 0. We don't know anything about it. So we need ambassadors that actually do. So we have a couple of ambassadors working in the psychiatric aid. And I use them all the time. As soon as I have a meeting with somebody and which I'm trying to sell our system to, the first question I get is, do you have a reference? Can we talk to somebody within the clinic, within another clinic that is using your system? And then I said, yeah, of course. I have a great guy, call him, and he will ask you all the questions, or he will answer all of your questions. And our ambassadors will get questions that I, as a salesperson, never will get. So it's really, really good to have them around. They also have a network that can be very difficult for us to tap into, because they have colleagues around the country and they will talk about your system to these colleagues. So when you call, they have already heard about you. And maybe the last thing, your ambassadors are not you. When I call operational manager, telling them about our system, I do this as a salesperson. And most of you probably don't like salespersons calling you, trying to sell you things. But your ambassadors, they are more like a colleague. So it's on a completely different level. Last one, accept that it takes time. It takes somewhere between 1 and 3 years to get the contract. And this is from the point when your customer says, yes, I'm interested in buying your system. From that point, it takes between 1 and 3 years. So it's really, really slow. You have to be persistent and be there all the time, helping them on the way. Because very often, the caregivers, their organization is not built to take care of small systems like this. They know how to buy a new medical journal record, but not a tiny little system used in a clinic somewhere. So it takes time. But before you get to that point, that yes, I'm interested in buying, you need to have at least somewhere between 5 and 10 contacts with your potential customers. And I do this through emails. I write newsletters maybe twice a year, and then mails about some great offer that we have. I call all operational managers in every region in Sweden at least once every year, just asking them, how are you doing and what's the status right now? Is it the right time to go along with our system or not? And also I try to meet them in person through trade fairs, conferences, and web meetings. That's one of the things that's been really good with the COVID, if there is something good, that I don't need to travel all around Sweden to meet people anymore. It's okay to set up a web meeting. And then you can set up a short web meeting for 15 minutes just to talk a little bit. So that's really, really good. And the last thing, since it takes such a long time and you need to have so many contacts, please use the CRM tool. I started off using Excel. It took maybe a year, and then I had no clue what I was doing anymore. I lost track of everything. So I started using a CRM tool, and now I have a good process, and I can follow everything, and it makes life so much easier. So this was all from me. I hope you learned something, and that you thought it was a little bit interesting. If you have any questions later on, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate that it was really hands-on. Sometimes we see the success, but we don't realize the journey that it takes to get there. So thank you, Patrick, for shedding light on that. And now we have our third speaker to also shed a different perspective. Corti, you have customers in both Sweden and Denmark. We have Andreas Cleve, the CEO of Corti, to share his journey and how he got to where he is today. So take it away, Andreas.
Thank you. And I guess I'm the mud of the bunch, since I'm half Swedish, half Danish. So whatever that means, must mean something, right? So I'm going to tell you a war story about how we grew from a couple people in a basement in 2016 to now being more than 100 people covering public sector healthcare customers on 3 continents, helping 16 million people a year get back better access to healthcare. So I'm not a doctor, and I don't sell to people on the basis of me knowing what's best. On the contrary, I am a patient, and I grew up in a family where access to healthcare was a pretty big part of me growing up. And what I learned from an entire childhood of living with chronically ill patient is that we're in a chasm between a lot of goodwill and the brightest people in the world and an entire system rigged against them. since the majority of the best people we have in the world luckily go to healthcare, but they don't have the system to help them succeed. And that's sort of what got me into healthcare, building Corti. So when this slide was made, 90 people, we come from a lot of different backgrounds. As you'll see, we have nobody who had a healthcare background because we never wanted to compete with our customers since we knew they would be way smarter, and we didn't want to become the Corti knows best kind of people. What we did was that we started looking for where could we apply ourselves best to change the system. So we don't believe that doctors need our help. We're not smarter. We don't have any upsides on them, but we can help the system. And when we started diving into it, what we found was the most archaic part of the system was this, the consultation. And it's obviously arts and science, primarily face-to-face, and quality obviously usually is expected to come from experience. That seemed odd to me as a technologist, like that's still how we do it at scale, reading the system against the doctor. Then we dived into the data. So an average physician in the US will have 150,000 patient consultations in a career. That's like filling 700 Boeing 747s, flying it on their own. And then we dove into the data of how are these consultations actually kickstarting the patient journey into healthcare. And that sort of became our basis for creating a business model. This is from the Mayo Clinic, who you all know. They put it to the test. So out of 100 people going into primary care for a consultation, 88% was given a diagnosis that was radically changed if a doctor or two gave it a second opinion. Even worse, a fourth of these 88%, that first diagnosis actually put the patients at risk. That's obviously not because they're not smart. At the Mayo Clinic, as we know, they are some of the smartest in the world. It's the system that's rigged. That led to this chart, which is, if you look at the death tolls in the US, obviously this is a problem, right? So all of a sudden we have this structural inefficiency that actually creates a death toll that puts a lot of bad branding on doctors who are the best we get. So how do we enable these people? That became our business model. Could we do something on these patient consultations which wasn't playing the smart guy in the room? We found, could we get more time back? Could we do all the gritty work around the consultations? And could we actually put the doctor in the best position to make a decision? That became quality assurance, feedback loops, and second opinions. That built Corti. Corti is an artificial intelligence tool, all built by Swedes and Danes and many other nationalities in Copenhagen. We have people here in town too. And what it does, it listens through a conversation. So imagine me talking right now. If our AI was here, it will listen to all of it. It would also listen to, and my, because that's a part of the diagnostic picture as well. So we went to doctors around the globe saying, hey guys, we're not really healthcare people, and we have no prior experience building diagnostics tools, and we've never had a patient consultations, but we think we can do it better. Obviously, nobody believed us. So we went back to the drawing board, and that started our work on the business model. And what we needed to do was figure out how do we actually train an AI that provided results that was trustworthy, because I am not believable and I shouldn't be. So what we did first is we did another machine learning model. That was our first part of our business model. Find out who is the ambassadors, to Peter's point. Who is the ambassadors? And we did that globally. So we scraped, that means going to the internet and reading by a computer every research paper in the world on our topic. Then we indexed it. Then we found the most cited researchers, and then we started writing them. Hey, Dr. Sayer, I see you're the best at this in the world. I'd love to meet you because we have AI tools that might be able to help the next Dr. Sayer become as good as you. That sent me on a plane. So I spent 2018, 212 days on a plane meeting the best in the world. A lot of traveling way before COVID kind of paradigm. What we found was the only place where we could prove we could help was where the consultation had a very finite end. And that's obviously the worst ones, the 911 calls here in Sweden, the 112 calls, which Corti listens into. So if you ever call 112 here, we're lucky to support the people you get in touch with. What these calls had was the opportunity to take a 911 call and actually look in the journal at the hospital. That means we could listen to the audio, the descriptions of bystanders and patients alike, but we could train the AI, so get the AI to understand when we hear this, it actually ends over here at the hospital. That allows us to do something that was very hard for a non-technical company, which was provide ground level truth in a very messy environment, which is a consultation. Because when I am, as a patient in a consultation, I am deciphering me. And I don't have a PhD in me. I've never got medical training in deciphering symptoms. I'm just providing the most biased framework for understanding myself and giving it to a doctor who has to decipher it in 7 to 8 minutes. But this actually gave the audio, what the patient said or the bystander said, and what actually ended up happening. That allows us to start building services. And that service was around a workflow. And that, I guess, is my first feedback as a non-medical person selling into healthcare. There is a lot of opportunity in just giving back time. And I see that a lot when I feedback healthcare startups who want to get into healthcare, but they have a solely clinical input. So we want to make the outcomes better. We all do. We're all patients. That would be great, right? But if you're not mapping to the workflows, the sales process will be 3 years. Because they need a budget for it, they can prove they need it, and there's no urgency on it. So our first case became, how do we get the sales time actually getting into Danish, Swedish, and beyond customers down in a meaningful way where it correlated to workflow value. So could we give you back time? Could we give you back readmissions? Could we give you back money? Could we code the calls better? If we hadn't gotten to that point where we moved our ideology away from like, we know better, we could diagnose, to, hey, we just want to give you more time to do it and give you the workflow benefit, then we would have been stuck in long sales cycles. Today, because we did this mapping, and I think that's so critically important, especially if you are from a healthcare background, that's at least the bias on my side, which I see a lot, is that we focus a lot on the clinical outcomes, the buy-ins from the doctors. But as we build this technology, we actually build clinical proof that if you had AI listening into a 112 call or a 911 call, we could actually reduce a lot of fatalities by just listening in. So 33% of those who were not diagnosed with a cardiac arrest in a 911 call would be if we just listened and popped up on screen. We could do it 25% faster, and we'd actually get them to stick to the medical protocol 92% of the time. That means something like in a city like Copenhagen, we could bring back 100 to 150 people a year to their families by just listening in. So why isn't everybody buying it like it's the simplest thing in the world? Because it's an outcome-driven medical standard and the health benefit case, and that takes 3 years. So the moment we started this, we went back to the best in the world in the emergency space and said, hey, are you going to buy it? Are you going to use it? They say, yeah, we are, but the process will be long. And that took a whole full year of journeying into business models to figure out, hey, we get the workflow great first, we get the savings in there, then we can start optimizing the outcomes. We've raised $32 million, and we've grown on all 3 continents. Our deal cycle right now is down to 6 months on deals that are at the magnitude of classic healthcare startups. And we actually move people through our CRM system at a quite high pace with very low churn. So very few people actually leave our funnel when they get in there. And that's a constant grinding on how good we are at putting ourselves in the position of the provider, the healthcare professional, the clinician, the ops manager, of getting them back time. And that's our goal, because obviously if you get more structured, then we can actually start giving you back. That leads me to pricing. So next thing we struggle with, like, how do we price this? What's the outcomes? What we found was meaningful is that if we cannot tie pricing to the money, the time we give you, then we have no point in life. So we tied every one of our pricing points to the consultation we listened to and the amount of time we gave back. And that actually correlated what we need to be world-class at to what we're pricing you on. And that's the next thing I see a lot in healthcare, is that we price quite arbitrarily, solely based on the health benefit case. And it will not get sold fast enough for you to build a meaningful company fast enough. This worked, as I said before. And what we can see is that actually as the AI gets smarter, we get smarter. That allows us to do more, give back more, and optimize the workflow better, and even drive healthcare benefits. Next big challenge for a company like us is obviously now we do healthcare, but emergency calls. Now we need to do way more. And again, in respect of the workflow, although we have heard 16 million patients, that means we have an AI that recalls every symptom described by 16 million patients on 5 languages. And it can recall it in a split second. It never needs coffee, no sleep, no cake, right? And it can give it back in 7 languages. So that means if we have a caller in Farsi, we can actually start talking back or give it to the physicians who can. But again, the workflow is so uniquely specific to every healthcare system. So we even see when I drive back over the bridge for 25 minutes that the structures are so differently. And I think that's my big eternal pusher. Get into the weeds of the workflow. Make sure you understand just how locally aligned it can be, and make sure that you keep that apart from the medical standards, which in turn again can be very driven by local standards. This allowed us to scale. We're opening up in 5 verticals as we speak. And ultimately, that allows us to hopefully keep scaling and giving back more to patients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for sharing an indeed very exciting war story. Please stay on stage, and I would like to invite Patrick and Thomas back to join me in a session that I will moderate. And I see that we've gotten a lot of questions from the audience, a lot of interest in what the three of you are doing. I'm just going to wait for Thomas
That's
to,
okay.
to get ready.
Please go ahead.
But I maybe can ask the first question, you can get thinking. And this is a question from the audience to all of you speakers. When signing the first commercial agreement, was there a key event or key individual which made it happen and got the deal signed? You can come and join me so that we spread out a bit. But maybe Patrick, you can start.
Yeah, well, the first deal we signed was with Region Gävleborg, and they actually ordered the system from us. But from they ordered and they pay for the development, and once the system was ready, it took almost a year before it was actually installed at them because their process was so slow. So even if they had ordered the system, it took a long time. But I think that was the key, that there was a nurse realizing that the ADHD treatment had to be different compared to what it is today. So he had an idea about how to do this, and he was definitely the key person driving this through all the whole process within the region.
Yeah, so you had a local ambassador.
Yes.
Yeah. Andreas.
I could say the same. It was just a different region, right? I think the more interesting question is not how you get that one ambassador who's as excited about it as you are, but how do you make a system out of getting those ambassadors? And I think to your point, sales is mathematics too. So although many of us might have a bias towards more tangible sciences, this is a social science as well, and we can use a lot of mathematics on it. So get your sales paradigm right. You use Sandler, you use Spin, you do it right, but you get the structures in, you get the CRM in, and you map your stakeholder map. And if you have a $100,000 a year deal, then it's going to be way more than just one person. But get those structures in before you think them funny, because that's ultimately what's going to make your system. I think that's the really interesting dialogue.
Thomas.
I think maybe the second, third, and fourth customer is more exciting than the first one, because the first one is always done by the early entrepreneurs of the company, which is not easy, super difficult. But the really difficult thing is to make it scale afterwards. Hire somebody to sell it, because at the early stage you're still navigating unclear waters, right? You're not super clear on the proposition, you're not super clear on the ideal customer, and it's more business development than it's sales at that point in time. So that tipping point where you can actually say, okay, now we can scale a sales model is the most difficult one, I think.
I think all three of you also touched on the importance of working with the clinicians, understanding their pain points and addressing that. There is a question here about how do we change the mindset of clinicians? Here it says to start trusting the digital information that's available for the patients, but I would like to broaden it. How do we get clinicians on board with digital solutions that work very differently from what they have been used to or trained with? Have you encountered any barriers, and how did you address that? Who's ready to start?
I can start.
All right.
We've seen a lot of barriers. I think, like yours. I mean, we're in the area of psychology, psychiatry. Most of the clinicians who've chosen that profession has not chosen it because they thought technology was interesting. It's actually a speech therapy area, right? They're used to talking to the patients. So we need to train, engage, follow up. It's typical customer success metrics that we're actually putting in place. It does take real support as well to make sure that they get the support when they need it, to trust the system and not have a first failure, because that will last for a long time.
Right, so building trust.
Yeah.
What about Andreas and Patrick?
You can start.
I totally agree with you, Thomas. But also, I think it's important to figure out what's the personal drive for a clinician. Like, what's in it for me? Treating more patients might not be it. No. But if I get a better working environment where I can spend more time with the patients that actually need it, then that can be a driver to go digital.
Yep.
So something like that. I would
Again,
say.
very specific. What's the benefit for you as
Yes.
a physician? Andreas?
I could agree. So just to go down a different path, I think as a technologist, I think we're just so spoiled. And I think this kind of narrative where how do we get the doctors to move or whatever, our job is seeing a version of the future. It's just a version. But the real job starts moving people into that version. And if you think that you should be able to just get doctors there by presenting it, you're wrong, right? Because being a physician is about not making really important mistakes before it is about making the best version of a patient journey, because you know there's so many variables. And here we come, give you the best version of the patient journey, but like there's tons of risk. So I think I think it's a really, really big hurdle, and I agree, but it's on us. It's on us as technologists and entrepreneurs
To educate the clinicians and
to
help
move them into the future and
Right.
reduce those risks for them.
To some extent, if I may pitch
Sure,
in.
of course,
I
Thomas.
think it's on us, but it's also on the purchaser to realize that implementing technology is also implementing change, because the change management work in a health region or in a municipality cannot be on us. I mean, that needs to be the responsibility of the acquiring or purchasing
It
entity.
takes two hands to clap.
Exactly.
There was another question here from actually one of our speakers. Did any of the companies try to sell the solution outside of Denmark and Sweden, and what were the hurdles? I mean, obviously, Andreas, you shared some of your journeys, but maybe I'll point the question to Thomas and Patrick.
We are on our way, but still we are just in Sweden. But
Okay.
we have started to look a bit outside Sweden.
All right, and Thomas.
I think regardless of where we've done things, one of the hurdles is the moving key stakeholders. That has been a challenge. So we've had a number of cases where the key decision makers move jobs quite quickly. And then your key sponsor is out of the picture. You need to educate a new key sponsor or get that key sponsor on board and to own that vision. That has been a challenge, both domestically in Denmark as well as abroad.
Right. Andreas, you talk a lot about, creating a structure and a system to get that funnel through and so on. And obviously you've had experiences quite globally. Have you seen a difference between the Danish, Swedish markets and Europe and maybe even America in their approach to your solution?
It's obviously very, very important to say that whatever learning I have, if you're selling a different product in a different market,
Sure.
if it's regulated, this will be different, right? I think we overemphasize the difference in respect to the vastness of the change that's happened during and post-COVID and the pace at which it happened. So an example from my world, I'm looking for people who have patient consultations, who want more quality, more success. And when I came to the US first, they had no data, they didn't record, they had very little protocols. And within 18, 24 months, the magnitude of change that's happened is so vast that I think it's very conform what they're doing at this point. I think that the real difficulties is obviously how do you navigate all these stakeholders, how do you navigate all these changes? And I think the real hurdle becomes how do you do that with a very limited resource pool. So how do I get my employees right now to service people in the time zone in Perth and Singapore all the way to Seattle? And how do you even account for them understanding how to prioritize within those many different paradigms?
Okay. And maybe just to continue a little bit before I jump to other specific questions, this is actually a question directed to you. When training the AI that you use for a Corti solution, how do you ensure to cover a vast amount of scenarios to avoid the AI being biased and increase accuracy, given that you're also working multiple markets, different demographics, so on? How do you manage that?
That's a long question, or a long answer at least to an important question. The first thing we didn't do is we didn't infer logic. And this can become a bit technical, but imagine if I told it every time somebody said coughing, then it's, now we have real bias because I am inferring. What you want is you want enough data to let the data speak, and you want to build modalities around data representations. So instead of saying bird, cat, bird, cat, bird, cat, I want to say this kind of thing seems to be a domestic animal. That's the kind of model you really want. Because the moment you resend data, especially in healthcare, that is more opaque, then you don't want to make overconfident models that just shoots, oh, it's a cat, but really it was a dog, right? And that's the issue we sit in internally. Do we have enough data to come with these kind of representation-based suggestions? And that's something we need to hold ourselves accountable to. And ultimately, What we do is that we actually go to a customer, then we ask them if, hey, can we prove we work, or else we won't sell to you. That's a very big hurdle on our resources, but we as professionals need to know that we're not overconfident in our models and we don't bias. And that's the only right answer. It's just getting more data, better representations, and inferring as little as possible, and writing down the second, third order actions that's going to happen if you have just inferred. And we have people doing like ground level research with the University of Copenhagen and Karolinska on stuff like exactly this, just meta learning.
Thanks, Andreas. And kind of linked to data, but in a different perspective. And this is to you, Thomas. Real-world data is not real-world evidence, at least for regulators or reimbursement authorities. Do you work with health providers to translate real-world data into real-world evidence for your solution?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the short answer. So real-world data is, I mean, that's a source for providing real-world evidence, right? To support post-market regulatory submissions, or even new indications or labeling revisions, etc. Right? But the data that is being collected is the same. So we can support trials, both in earlier trials in pharma as well as in university settings, but also the post-market launch studies that are being conducted.
Okay. And Patrick, we have a very specific question for you. Interest in how very concretely you get into the Swedish market, because I think there's a lot of discussion on how exactly do you get the regions to buy a solution, and you've got 5 regions on board.
Yeah.
So this question is, when you made your first contact in Sweden, did you start with a phone call or email? And I think this is touching on, very specific, the way that we communicate, and whether you see there is a cultural difference, and what would be the best approach?
I try to use all kinds of means. Very often it's difficult to find contact details to the operations manager within the psychiatry that we work in the regions. So if I find a phone number, I will give them a call. If I find an email address, I will send an email. So if I run into them in a fair, I will talk to them at that point. So I try to just sort of find one way to contact, and if that is successful, I will use that and then build more contact ways into that region. And very often it could be the ambassador that said, yeah, I want to get into this region. Do you know anybody in this region? And then he or she can say, yeah, I know this person. And then I call them.
Yeah.
And so just find someone. And sometimes it's the switchboard at the hospital. I call them, I want to talk to the operations manager at this clinic in this hospital. And they say, okay, let's connect you. And that's also good. When it comes from the switchboard, it's not like an outside call. So it could be an easier way to get in, actually.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because I know in Sweden and maybe Denmark, there's a lot of thought on, do you need a network in order to connect, and can you do cold calls? And what you're saying is persevere, just find a way in, but also in parallel, get your ambassadors or people that can vouch for your solution, and in parallel that.
Yeah. Can I give an example?
Of course.
When it comes to cold calls and stuff like that, we signed a deal with a private clinic in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago, and she gave me a call in August and said, Patrick, in May last year, you sent me an email about an offer that we could try your system for free for a couple of months. And I said, yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. Well, at that time, we were not ready, but now we are interested in doing this. Is it okay? Can we use the same deal? And they said, of course. So we signed a deal, and now they're a paying customer. And it was just a mail. I found an email address on their website, and I sent, hey, do you want to try our system for free? And 1.5 years later, she called me and said, yes.
So watch what you write in your email from before.
Yeah.
Very good. Another question for you, Thomas, regarding your solution. Question, are patients using the tech platform consistently? How do they stick to the platform in the long run? Talking about, patient adherence, and do you see that they actually stick to the program?
So we have very high adherence rates. It does differ a bit between the different disorders, but in the area of bipolar, borderline, for instance, we're talking about 80% level after 3 months still.
Okay.
It's all because there is somebody at the other end. It's because it's connected to a healthcare professional, and there's a joint contract, you can say, between the two that they're using it, right? So the key is to get the healthcare professionals engaged. Obviously, in some of the other disorder areas like anxiety, we made some projects a little lower because it's more sporadic, the disease or the symptoms. So that's it.
And Andreas, a question on privacy. We're in the region of GDPR. What is the data protection policy procedure for Corti? Do the people that call 911 or 112 know that they are being listened on by an AI?
So we don't operate data ourselves, and we don't own any data, which we could, but we've decided not to. So we operate on the same servers that's hopefully already been there. So here in Sweden, we support ISO's alarm. We don't own any data. We don't aggregate any data. We don't keep any data. They do, and they've always done. They've done that for 12 years, 14 years, and they continue to do so. Now they're just able to activate that data to give something back to patients. So some of the cases that's historically riddled on, be it meningitis patients or patients who didn't get the right kind of treatment fast enough, that they can now spot proactively with the same data they've already stored. This, of course, can be a way more technical discussion on how that works, how you alert, and that's very, very bound by which part of the healthcare system you support. So we support primary care physicians where you have to opt in. We support emergency departments that's also opt in. And we have services where you opt out too. So it's very bound by classic data legislation, which was also hard before GDPR.
Yeah. I would like to kind of summarize our discussion and also link it back to the previous session when we heard from the bigger players like Roche, big pharma company, Bosch, big tech company. What are your impressions with partnering with such bigger players like Bosch and Roche and others? Are they worth piggybacking on when thinking about scaling up your solution even further? What are your thoughts?
Well, we hope they are. We have started that journey. So we are looking for partners. Wilhelm?
This is being recorded as we speak.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it will be beneficial for everyone if we can work together instead of inventing the same thing multiple times at different locations. I think we need to work together.
Andreas?
I don't believe it at all. But, and I've done this, my first healthcare startup was in 2010, so I've been around the block a couple of times. And I'm not saying that Roche, as you're saying there, could be great for a biopharma startup, very, very positively. I would just be very attuned to, as an entrepreneur, that you don't hang your hat on something where the corporate or pharma or whatever partner you want to work with actually isn't attuned to you providing them actual value in their workflow. So if you're not making Roche more money, you're going to get more believability. That can be very nice, but you're not going to make money on it.
Thomas?
We do work with pharmaceuticals and with private partners internationally to go to market. Pros and cons. We've chosen to do so, and that's a choice. It's always a balance of whether you want to have the clinical business scale as a startup, or whether you want to have bigger projects with pharmaceuticals, right? Because when you have projects with pharmaceuticals, you're also enrolled in a lot of the healthcare compliance, the pharmacovigilance stuff, etc. And sometimes it takes your product down, because pharmaceuticals may not want free text fields, etc. It becomes a little complex. But some of the internal departments within the pharmaceutical may actually take some of the great functionality out of a product because they're not allowed to take it to market, which is a little bit sad sometimes.
Hopefully you can continue the discussion as well during the break. I have one last question for you before we go for coffee. You've shared a lot about your journeys, and it's been very different journeys that the three of you have taken. If you could summarize for the aspiring startups in this room, In 3 words, key crystal advice for them in their journey to help them succeed, what would they be? 3 words, or 3 to 5, but crystal.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that it takes such a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, I must say that's it. That it goes so slowly.
So be patient.
Yes.
Yes.
Get more top funnel. So you're talking to few people, too few companies, too slow, and you're not being vigilant enough on it. So talk to more people faster.
Okay, good. Be patient, talk to more people faster. Thomas.
Product market fit fixed first, then understand who the customer is and sell. That would be my 3 things.
So you have a 3 in 3. So product market fit, understand your
Key customer.
key customer, and then
And
sell.
why it helps them, right?
Yeah.
Back to your point before, right? You need to give them more and then sell.
Just go for it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Thomas, Andreas, and Patrick, for sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thank you very
Stick
much.
around.
Thank you.